If your blood sugar looks decent during the day, but spikes overnight or first thing in the morning, this is something you need to understand. Most people blame dinner, carbs, or late night snacks. But for many diabetics and pre-diabetics, the real issue isn't food at all. It's a specific vitamin that controls how stable your blood sugar stays while you sleep. At night, your body enters a very different metabolic state. Insulin sensitivity drops, the liver releases stored glucose, and stress hormones quietly rise to keep you alive while you rest. If this vitamin is low, blood sugar can climb even when you haven't eaten anything for hours. That's why some people wake up with higher readings than they went to bed with, and never understand why. In this video, I'll explain which vitamin helps stabilize blood sugar overnight, how it works on your liver and insulin response, why deficiency is extremely common, and how to use it safely so it supports nighttime glucose control instead of interfering with sleep. In a moment, I'll explain why blood sugar behaves completely differently at night than during the day, and why most advice ignores this. To understand why this vitamin matters so much at night, you first need to understand what actually happens to blood sugar while you sleep. When you fall asleep, your body does not stop regulating glucose. In fact, nighttime is one of the most sensitive periods for blood sugar control. Insulin sensitivity naturally declines as the day ends, meaning your cells become less responsive to insulin. This makes it harder for glucose to move from the bloodstream into muscle and fat cells. At the same time, the liver becomes more active overnight. Its role during sleep is to release small, controlled amounts of glucose into the bloodstream to keep your brain supplied with energy. This process is known as hepatic glucose output, and under healthy conditions, it is tightly regulated. The problem is that in people with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or type 2 diabetes, this regulation breaks down. Instead of releasing glucose gradually, the liver may release too much at once. Because insulin sensitivity is lower at night, the body struggles to counteract this release. Glucose remains elevated in the bloodstream for longer periods, which is why many people wake up with higher fasting blood sugar than they had before bed. Hormones make this even more complicated. During sleep, especially in the early morning hours, hormones like cortisol and growth hormone naturally rise. These hormones are essential for waking, tissue repair, and energy balance, but they also signal the liver to release glucose. When insulin signaling is already impaired, these hormonal surges can push blood sugar even higher. This phenomenon is often referred to as the dawn effect, but similar spikes can happen earlier in the night as well. Here's where this vitamin becomes critically important. This vitamin plays a direct role in insulin sensitivity, glucose transport, and liver glucose regulation. It influences how responsive cells are to insulin and how aggressively the liver releases stored glucose. When levels of this vitamin are low, insulin signaling becomes weaker, especially during periods of naturally reduced sensitivity like nighttime. Low levels also increase inflammation, which further interferes with insulin's ability to work properly. Inflammatory signaling makes liver cells more likely to release excess glucose and makes muscle cells less efficient at absorbing it. What makes this issue difficult to detect is that symptoms are subtle or completely absent. Most people do not feel overnight blood sugar spikes. There is no immediate discomfort. The only sign appears later in the form of elevated fasting glucose, higher morning readings, or unstable overnight patterns on a continuous glucose monitor. Modern lifestyle factors make deficiency extremely common. Limited sun exposure, indoor living, aging, excess body fat, poor sleep quality, and chronic inflammation all reduce the body's ability to maintain adequate levels of this vitamin. Even people who eat well and take medications can be deficient without realizing it. Studies have consistently shown that low levels of this vitamin are associated with higher fasting glucose, poorer insulin sensitivity, and increased difficulty controlling blood sugar overnight. When levels are restored to an optimal range, insulin signaling improves and liver glucose output becomes more stable. Importantly, this vitamin does not force blood sugar down or act like a drug. Instead, it supports normal physiology. It helps the body respond to insulin appropriately, reduces unnecessary glucose release from the liver, and creates a more stable metabolic environment during sleep. This explains why some people notice improvements in overnight and morning blood sugar after correcting deficiency, even without major changes to diet or medication. The body is simply better equipped to regulate glucose during one of its most vulnerable periods. In the next section, we'll identify exactly which vitamin this is, how it works at the cellular level, and why deficiency is so widespread, even among people actively trying to manage their diabetes. Most people think of vitamin D only in relation to bone health or immunity, but vitamin D functions more like a hormone than a typical vitamin. Nearly every cell involved in blood sugar regulation has vitamin D receptors, including pancreatic beta cells, liver cells, muscle tissue, and fat cells. This becomes especially important at night. Vitamin D directly influences insulin sensitivity by improving how insulin binds to its receptors on cells. When insulin binds properly, glucose can move out of the bloodstream and into cells where it can be used for energy or stored safely. When vitamin D levels are low, this signaling pathway becomes less efficient, and insulin has to work harder to achieve the same effect. At night, insulin sensitivity is already naturally reduced due to circadian rhythm changes. Low vitamin D compounds this effect, making glucose regulation even more difficult. As a result, blood sugar remains elevated longer, and the liver becomes more likely to release additional glucose unnecessarily. Vitamin D also plays a role in insulin production itself. Pancreatic beta cells depend on adequate vitamin D levels to release insulin in a timely and appropriate manner. Deficiency has been linked to impaired insulin secretion, meaning the body may not release enough insulin when glucose rises during the night. Another critical role of vitamin D is its effect on inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the strongest drivers of insulin resistance. Inflammatory signaling interferes with insulin's ability to communicate with cells, making glucose uptake less efficient. Vitamin D has well-documented anti-inflammatory effects that help reduce inflammatory markers throughout the body. This matters at night because sleep disturbances, stress, and circadian misalignment all increase inflammation overnight. Poor sleep quality alone has been shown to worsen insulin resistance the following day. Adequate vitamin D helps counteract this inflammatory environment and supports more stable metabolic signaling during sleep. Vitamin D also affects liver function in a very specific way. The liver is responsible for releasing glucose overnight to maintain brain function, but this release must be tightly regulated. Vitamin D helps regulate genes involved in glucose production and storage within liver cells. When vitamin D levels are sufficient, the liver is less likely to overproduce glucose. When levels are low, hepatic glucose output becomes more aggressive, contributing to elevated overnight and fasting blood sugar. What makes vitamin D deficiency so widespread is that modern lifestyles significantly reduce natural vitamin D production. Limited sun exposure, indoor living, sunscreen use, aging skin, higher body fat levels, and geographic location all reduce the body's ability to synthesize vitamin D from sunlight. Dietary sources of vitamin D are limited, And even fortified foods usually do not provide enough to maintain optimal levels. As a result, many people with insulin resistance or diabetes remain deficient without realizing it. Blood tests frequently show low or borderline vitamin D levels in people who struggle with fasting glucose, morning spikes, or rising A1C, despite making dietary changes. Correcting this deficiency does not replace medication or diet, but it often allows existing strategies to work more effectively. It's important to understand that vitamin D does not act like a fast-acting glucose-lowering agent. It does not force blood sugar down quickly or cause sudden drops. Instead, it works gradually by improving insulin sensitivity, supporting proper insulin release, reducing inflammation, and stabilizing liver glucose output. This regulatory effect is why improvements in overnight and morning blood sugar often take several weeks to appear. The body needs time to restore balance at the cellular, hormonal, and metabolic level. In the next section, we'll cover how to use vitamin D correctly for nighttime blood sugar support, including timing considerations, dosage ranges, absorption factors, and common mistakes that can limit its effectiveness or interfere with sleep. Knowing that vitamin D supports overnight blood sugar stability is only part of the picture. How it is used matters just as much as having it in the body. One of the most common mistakes people make is assuming that more vitamin D automatically means better results. Vitamin D works best when it supports balance, not when it is taken aggressively or inconsistently. First, timing plays a role. Vitamin D is fat-soluble and long-acting, which means it does not work like a stimulant or fast-acting supplement. For most people, vitamin D can be taken earlier in the day or with the largest meal rather than right before bed. Taking it with food improves absorption, especially when the meal contains healthy fats. Some people worry that vitamin D will interfere with sleep. While very high doses late at night may feel stimulating for some individuals, moderate doses taken earlier in the day generally do not disrupt sleep and still support nighttime blood sugar regulation because vitamin D levels remain stable in the bloodstream. Dosage is another critical factor. Many people remain deficient because they take doses that are too low to correct deficiency. Typical multivitamins often contain small amounts that are not enough to significantly raise blood levels, especially in people with obesity, insulin resistance, or limited sun exposure. At the same time, extremely high doses without monitoring are not recommended. Vitamin D works best when blood levels are brought into an optimal range and maintained steadily over time. Blood testing is the most reliable way to determine individual needs and avoid both deficiency and excess. Consistency matters more than speed. Vitamin D does not produce immediate changes in blood sugar. Its effects build gradually as insulin sensitivity improves, inflammation decreases, and liver glucose output becomes more regulated. Skipping doses or taking vitamin D sporadically reduces its ability to support these long-term processes. Absorption is another often overlooked factor. Because vitamin D is fat-soluble, taking it without food can significantly reduce absorption. Pairing vitamin D with a meal that contains healthy fats improves bioavailability and helps maintain stable blood levels. This allows vitamin D to exert its effects consistently, including overnight. Interactions with other nutrients also matter. Vitamin D works closely with minerals involved in glucose metabolism and insulin signaling. Imbalances in these nutrients can limit vitamin D's effectiveness. This is one reason some people do not see improvements until multiple deficiencies are addressed together. It's also important to understand what vitamin D cannot do. Vitamin D does not replace medications, does not cancel out poor sleep, and does not override excessive nighttime eating. Its role is supportive. It helps the body respond better to insulin, reduces unnecessary glucose release, and improves metabolic stability during sleep. People who benefit the most from correcting vitamin D deficiency often notice gradual improvements in fasting blood sugar, fewer unexplained morning spikes, and more predictable overnight patterns on glucose monitors. These changes tend to appear over weeks rather than days. Lifestyle factors can enhance vitamin D's effects. Regular sleep schedules, exposure to morning sunlight, moderate physical activity, and reduced nighttime stress all improve insulin sensitivity and complement vitamin D's role in blood sugar regulation. When these factors work together, nighttime glucose control becomes easier to manage. It's also worth noting that vitamin D requirements can change over time. Seasonal changes, weight fluctuations, aging, and medication use can all affect vitamin D status. Periodic monitoring helps ensure levels remain supportive rather than suboptimal. In the next section, we'll cover common mistakes people make with vitamin D that prevent it from helping blood sugar at night, including dosing errors, timing issues, and assumptions that lead to frustration or inconsistent results. Even though vitamin D plays an important role in stabilizing blood sugar while you sleep, many people never experience its full benefits. In most cases, this is not because vitamin D is ineffective, but because several common mistakes quietly interfere with how it works in the body. One of the most frequent mistakes is expecting vitamin D to work immediately. Vitamin D does not act like insulin or a fast-acting glucose-lowering medication. It does not rapidly push blood sugar down within hours or days. Instead, vitamin D works by gradually improving insulin sensitivity, reducing chronic inflammation, and helping regulate how the liver releases glucose overnight. These processes take time. When people expect quick results and do not see immediate changes, they often stop supplementation too early, before meaningful metabolic improvements can occur. Another common issue is inconsistent intake. Vitamin D works best when blood levels are kept stable over time. Skipping doses, taking it sporadically, or frequently changing the amount prevents the body from maintaining an optimal level. This inconsistency weakens vitamin D's ability to support insulin signaling and liver glucose regulation during sleep. Consistency matters far more than short-term high doses. Timing mistakes can also limit effectiveness. Some people take vitamin D late at night in large doses and experience restlessness or disrupted sleep. Poor sleep quality increases cortisol levels and worsens insulin resistance the following day. While vitamin D itself does not inherently disturb sleep, poor timing or excessive dosing can indirectly interfere. For most people, taking vitamin D earlier in the day or with a meal provides steady blood levels without affecting sleep quality. Absorption issues are another major reason vitamin D appears ineffective. Vitamin D is fat-soluble, meaning it requires dietary fat to be absorbed properly. Taking it on an empty stomach or with very low-fat meals significantly reduces absorption. In these cases, blood levels may remain low even when supplementation is regular. This leads people to assume vitamin D is not working, when the real issue is poor absorption rather than lack of intake. Another mistake is ignoring baseline deficiency. Many people never test their vitamin D levels. Without knowing baseline status, it is impossible to determine whether intake is sufficient, inadequate, or excessive. Individuals with obesity, insulin resistance, darker skin pigmentation, limited sun exposure, or certain medical conditions often require higher amounts to correct deficiency. Others may need less to maintain healthy levels. Guessing leads to underdosing, frustration, or unrealistic expectations. Vitamin D also does not work in isolation. If sleep quality is poor, stress levels are high, or late-night eating is frequent, vitamin D alone cannot fully stabilize blood sugar overnight. Chronic sleep deprivation raises cortisol and increases hepatic glucose output. Persistent stress worsens insulin resistance. Vitamin D supports regulation, but it cannot override severe lifestyle disruptions by itself. Medication interactions can further complicate results. Certain medications affect vitamin D metabolism, insulin sensitivity, or liver glucose production. In these cases, vitamin D may still provide benefits, but improvements tend to be slower and more subtle. Expectations need to remain realistic, especially when medications influence glucose regulation. Another overlooked mistake is focusing only on fasting glucose numbers. Some people experience smoother overnight glucose patterns before fasting levels noticeably improve. Continuous glucose monitoring often shows reduced nighttime variability before morning numbers change. This is still a sign that metabolic regulation is improving, even if fasting readings lag behind. Finally, many people stop monitoring vitamin D status once levels improve. Vitamin D needs are not static. Seasonal changes, weight gain or loss, aging, illness, and changes in sun exposure all influence vitamin D requirements. What worked at one point may no longer be sufficient later. Periodic reassessment helps ensure continued support for overnight blood sugar stability. When vitamin D is used correctly, taken consistently, absorbed properly, timed appropriately, and combined with supportive habits, it can play a meaningful role in stabilizing blood sugar while you sleep. Avoiding these common mistakes allows vitamin D's regulatory effects to work the way they are intended. Stabilizing blood sugar at night is not about forcing numbers down or chasing quick fixes. It's about supporting the systems that regulate glucose when your body is most vulnerable. Vitamin D does not work overnight, and it does not replace diet, medication, or medical guidance. But when levels are low, blood sugar regulation becomes harder than it needs to be, especially during sleep, when insulin sensitivity drops and liver glucose output increases. Correcting deficiency allows insulin to work more effectively, reduces unnecessary glucose release, and supports more stable overnight patterns. For many people, this leads to smoother fasting numbers, fewer unexplained spikes, and better overall glucose control over time. If you're considering vitamin D, it's important to use it responsibly. Blood testing, proper dosing, consistent intake, and good absorption all matter. Always discuss supplements with your healthcare provider, especially if you are taking medication or managing a medical condition. Blood sugar control is not about perfection. It's about stability, consistency, and understanding how your body works, day and night. In the next videos, we'll continue breaking down nutrients, habits, and mechanisms that help improve blood sugar control safely and sustainably, so you can make informed decisions and manage diabetes with more confidence.